With the Fantastic Four movie hitting theaters this July, it's time to look back. What went wrong with the previous attempts in 2015? Today on CBR, we dive into the history of Marvel's first family on the big screen. Superhero films typically thrive on robust narratives, compelling character arc, and meticulously paced storytelling. Unfortunately, Fantastic Four faltered in all of these areas, suffering from a disjointed structure, erratic tonal shifts, and a lack of crucial sequences. It created an experience that felt jarring and incomplete. But at its core, the movie did boast a solid foundation. The first act introduces a young Reed Richards, an extraordinarily gifted scientist who, along his childhood friend, Ben Grimm, creates a groundbreaking teleportation device. His brilliance attracts the attention of the Baxter Foundation, a research facility for prodigious minds, where Reed teams up with Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, and Victor Von Doom to further advance the device. This portion of the film plays out like a slow burn, character-driven sci-fi drama, leaning heavily on scientific exploration and interpersonal dynamics, with barely even a hint at capes or cosmic battles. While this approach had the potential to offer an intriguing twist on the superhero origin formula, the film just takes a horrible turn in the second half. It pivots abruptly, morphing into a chaotic, high-stakes action film that really struggles to establish anything coherent. It completely loses its narrative momentum. The result is a fractured tonal experience, with the transition from thoughtful science fiction to a rushed superhero showdown feeling jarring and undermined by poorly developed characters and a clumsy resolution. The pacing is really inconsistent, leaving the film feeling like a hybrid of two very different movies awkwardly stitched together. The initial portion of Fantastic Four shows some genuine potential. The director, Josh Trank, appeared to be crafting a grounded, character-centric reinterpretation of the team, channeling more of a sci-fi thriller vibe than your typical comic book fare. This film takes its time, emphasizing the character's ambition and idealism, particularly Reed's insatiable thirst for discovery and Victor's gradual descent into hubris. The interpersonal dynamics are full of tension. Victor's growing disdain for authority, the complicated sibling-like rivalry between Sue and Johnny, and the palpable strain between Reed and Ben as their lifelong friendship begins to unravel. The pivotal moment comes when the team embarks on their ill-fated journey to Planet Zero, an alternate dimension. Fearing that the government will appropriate their work, Reed, Johnny, Ben, and Victor secretly venture through the quantum gate to explore the unknown. However, this mission devolves into disaster. Victor seemingly meets his demise, and the rest of the team experiences life-altering transformations when the quantum gate explodes. The scene is visually striking, drenched in an eerie body horror atmosphere as the characters are forced to confront their disturbing, newly acquired abilities. At this juncture, the film establishes a range of captivating conflicts. First, the characters must reconcile their newfound powers, questioning whether these abilities are a curse or a blessing. Also, the government's intervention hints at a looming power struggle as military operatives attempt to weaponize the gifts. And then, Reed, he's racked with guilt, takes it upon himself to find a solution, all while grappling with his own physical and moral metamorphosis. But then, disappointingly, all of these compelling plot threads are just abandoned. After the team's disastrous return from Planet Zero, Fantastic Four leaps forward a full year without any proper explanation or meaningful character development. This time jump shatters the pacing. It robs the audience of any emotional connection to the characters. Instead of witnessing how the team grapples with the newfound powers, we're hit with a rushed montage that glosses over critical moments. Ben, now the Thing, is relegated to working for the military, weaponized for covert missions. Johnny, embracing his abilities, is training to become a soldier. Sue is largely relegated to the background, her character seemingly reduced to a mere spectator in the chaos. Reed, for reasons that are never even fully explained, has gone into hiding, abandoning his friends without any justifiable emotional context. This structural misstep completely derails the film's flow, stripping away essential character development. Instead of delving into Reed's inner turmoil and guilt, or watching the government's manipulation of Ben and Johnny, the audience is abruptly thrust into a completely different movie, devoid of the emotional arc it had been setting up. You can really just see the producer taking over the film and changing its direction. The film's tension evaporates entirely as a result. The Thing's involvement in the military could have been a morally complex arc, yet it's breezed over with barely a mention. Johnny's transformation from impulsive hothead to the team's potential hero is just barely even touched upon, leaving his development to feel rushed and kinda shallow. Sue, one of the most powerful members of the team, is rendered almost irrelevant, with little agency or narrative importance. To make matters worse, the film's visual continuity is completely compromised. Due to extensive reshoots, the actors' appearances are jarringly inconsistent. With a young, ambitious director at the helm, a stellar cast, and a daring, fresh take on one of Marvel's most iconic superhero teams, the potential was immense. What followed quickly became one of the most infamous production disasters in the history of modern superhero cinema. This film was plagued by extreme studio interference, clashing creative visions, and a barrage of last-minute reshoots, ultimately resulting in a disjointed, unfinished mess. This wasn't just the tale of a poorly executed movie. It was a film that was fundamentally fractured long before it ever made its way to the big screen, bearing the scars of its troubled development like a multiverse anomaly gone wrong. Director Josh Trank, fresh off the success of Chronicle, was tasked with bringing a darker, more grounded, and realistic approach to Fantastic Four. His vision leaned heavily into the sci-fi thriller genre, drawing inspiration from body horror maestros like David Cronenberg and the gritty, realistic storytelling of Christopher Nolan. The intent was to reimagine the Fantastic Four not as a flashy superhero spectacle, but as a cerebral exploration of young, brilliant scientists grappling with the horrific consequences of their transformations. This approach represented a stark departure from earlier Fantastic Four adaptations' bombastic, heavy action tone. Rather than the vibrant costumes and explosive battles audiences had come to expect, Trank envisioned a film with muted colors, a deliberate pace, and an introspective narrative more in line with The Fly than The Avengers. He wanted to emphasize the human cost of their powers, turning the team's transformations into a tragic journey of self-doubt and moral conflict. The director's vision collided violently with the expectations of 20th Century Fox. The studio, eager to craft a blockbuster that could compete with the Marvel Cinematic Universe's juggernaut success, wanted a more traditional, action-packed superhero film. Fox executives, unsure about Trank's darker, unconventional approach, they began to interfere. As the production neared completion, they mandated extensive rewrites and reshoots, forcing the film into a new direction that bore little resemblance to Trank's original vision. The result was a fractured and incoherent film, and like we talked about, it merged two distinct styles, one reflecting the original, somber, introspective approach, and another that felt like a hasty attempt to appease the studio's blockbuster aspirations. Half of it was Trank's daring take, and the other half a studio-mandated compromise. One of the clearest indications of studio meddling in Fantastic Four is the jarring visual and narrative inconsistencies that just permeate throughout the film. After the initial cut was completed, 20th Century Fox ordered extensive reshoots to inject more action and streamline the plot. But these changes were made with little regard for continuity or cohesiveness. As a result, the actors' appearances fluctuate noticeably throughout the film. Initially, Kate Mara had dyed blonde hair for the role, but when she returned for reshoots months later, her hair had noticeably changed. Instead of re-dyeing it, the studio opted for a cheap, stiff-looking wig that stands out like a sore thumb in many scenes. immediately signaling to the audience something was off. Similarly, Michael B. Jordan's facial hair shifts wildly across different scenes. In one, he's clean shaven, while in another, he sports a mustache and goatee. These discrepancies point to the fact that these scenes were shot at different times, with little attention given to maintaining visual consistency. Even Miles Teller, portraying Reed Richards, appears noticeably different in various shots. Since the reshoots were conducted long after Teller had moved on to other projects, the character's look and overall demeanor feel very inconsistent, further undermining the film's flow and believability. These glaring visual errors make it painfully obvious which scenes were added in post-production, leaving the film with a disjointed, unfinished quality. Instead of a seamless narrative experience, the audience is left with a patchwork of disconnected moments that highlight the chaos behind the scenes. The behind-the-scenes turmoil surrounding Fantastic Four was so profound that Josh Trank himself publicly distanced himself from the project before it even hit theaters. Just a day before the film's release, Trank tweeted and quickly deleted a cryptic message. "A year ago, I had a fantastic version of this, and it would have received great reviews. You'll probably never see it. That's reality, though." Oh, dang, you took it hard. This tweet was a pointed confirmation of the extent of studio interference, with Trank revealing that the version he envisioned for Fantastic Four was drastically altered by Fox. Fox's heavy-handed changes, however, backfired spectacularly. Rather than crafting a film that could appeal to a broad mainstream audience, the result was a product that alienated both fans and critics alike. The film underperformed at the box office. The director was dropped from his high-profile Star Wars spin-off project, with Lucasfilm citing concerns over his handling of Fantastic Four's troubled production. The movie and its disastrous development left a permanent scar on his career. A cautionary tale of creative vision clashing with studio expectations. Dr. Doom is universally known as one of the greatest and most iconic villains in comic book history. In Fantastic Four, his betrayal is nothing short of a colossal letdown, reducing one of the most complex figures in comic lore to a barely there, uninspired afterthought. For the majority of the film, Doom is just absent. After the catastrophic event on Planet Zero, where Victor Von Doom is seemingly lost and left behind, the film seems to completely forget about his existence for almost an hour. This absence is baffling, as the character is one of the primary antagonists of the Fantastic Four franchise, and yet his role is completely sidelined. He simply reappears without any warning in the third act. Visually, the portrayal of Doom is equally disappointing. The character's iconic look, green cloak, metallic mask, and the dignified stature, is one of the most recognizable and imposing designs in comic book history. In this version, Doom's design is a complete disaster. Instead of the menacing, armored form, we are presented with a grotesque version of the character who looks more like a melted crash test dummy. His transformation into this disfigured being is jarring and visually unappealing. Rather than feeling like a powerful, calculated villain, Doom looks more like a low-budget sci-fi villain that doesn't belong in a major blockbuster. Maybe the biggest issue with Doom and Fantastic Four is that he simply doesn't matter to the story. He's never truly developed as a character. There's no exploration of his motivations or his backstory, which are critical components of his comic book persona. He barely interacts with the Fantastic Four, and his only role in the narrative is to serve as a final obstacle in a rushed, lackluster third act. His presence feels tacked on, as though the filmmakers were obligated to include a traditional villain just to round out the movie, but they didn't know how to make him meaningful. In the end, Doom doesn't serve as the emotional or intellectual counterpoint to Reed Richards that he should have. Instead, he's relegated to a mere plot device, a final battle tool to give the movie some semblance of resolution. With Marvel Studios taking the reins, we're hopeful that Fantastic Four: First Steps will finally do justice to these iconic heroes. With a strong vision, compelling storytelling, and thrilling action, this reboot has potential to erase past failures. What are you most excited to see in Fantastic Four: First Steps? Let us know in the comments, remember to hit subscribe, and until next time, thanks for watching CBR.